Welcome back to another episode of Void City Customs. I am Dan, and today we're going to be looking at a custom McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Begins Christian Bale figure that I made. This figure, it kind of was a happy accident that came out of nowhere while I was making a different figure, which will be in a future video once I make it again, because this happened instead. And it's actually probably in my top 3 favorite customs I've ever made. So, as I mentioned, this is a custom McFarlane Toys Batman Begins Christian Bale figure. There is not currently a Batman Begins Christian Bale figure, so wanting to have one for my shelf because it's filling up with all these other Dark Knight characters, I decided to make one for myself, sort of while I was making a different figure. And I think it turned out pretty good, actually. This is all McFarlane parts from different McFarlane DC Multiverse Batman figures. The only things I had to actually make were the cape and the cape clips that he has on his collarbones here to hold the cape on. Everything else is McFarlane Toys parts. Some of them are modified a bit. We'll get to that. Otherwise, if you have all these figures, it is possible you could make this figure yourself. I'll show you any paints that I used and the tools as well. Let's get started. So the reason I have this guy taken apart like this is because I figured it'd be easier to show you guys the process of making this figure. I didn't really take any video or anything of putting this guy together. I do have some photos though, so I'll throw those in there when it's appropriate. Anyway, let's begin. Begin, no pun intended. So you've got all the main pieces right here. There's his whole body and everything. He also has a bunch of accessories. I'll show those first, I guess. The first thing I kind of did was I took the Batrocitus head and I just sprayed it all black with the same paint that I used for the rest of the body, which we will get to in a moment. But that is supposed to kind of look like the scene where he is interrogating Jonathan Crane and he gives Crane a dose of his own medicine, so to speak, and Crane starts hallucinating and seeing a giant monster. I know the ears aren't exactly accurate. I may in the future cut the face off of this and put it on another Dark Knight head and sort of do like a face-off type switch. But, you know, I may not. I might just leave it like this. This one looks fine. I kind of like that it changes the whole shape of his head and makes him look more monstrous. There's 2 additional hands. So I've got the trigger finger hand here, which would be used for the grapnel gun. And I've got the fist for the left hand here. And currently on him, I have the fist for the right hand and a kind of like angry fight hand, I guess you'd call it, I don't know, for the left hand. There's also 3 batarangs, which are humongous because batarangs are always humongous for McFarlane Toys. These things should be teeny tiny, but it is what it is. I'll live. The grapnel is also the one that came with the Dark Knight figure. However, I did paint it. It was all gold. I added the black parts. I masked off the whole thing and then added those on there so it looks more screen accurate and better for displaying. All right, let's get into the main meat and potatoes of this figure. Let's move his legs over here. This kind of reminds me of the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, not the Batman one. So first off, you've got the torso here with the head attached, and there are the cape clips, so you can see them. I'd just like to say I think this is a really good head sculpt for this figure. I didn't do anything to that. I left that as it was. I didn't even paint it. I think it looks fine, especially when you get it in the shadow like this. It makes it look even far more like the Begins profile. I know the neck isn't thick enough, but, you know, it is what it is. I worked with what I had, and I think it came out great. So my only complaint about the suit is the texture on the chest up here. This is the only place where it really has it, other than the butterfly little shoulder guys that go in here. I'll show you those in a minute, the discs. So basically, what we've got here is the head for the Dark Knight figure, and this torso and neck are from the Death Metal Batman, who came with the trench coat and the scythe. He's the one who rides around on that big skeleton motorcycle. That's what this top part is. This bottom part is interesting. You'll notice the abs are pretty much screen accurate almost, Batman Begins abs. Well, the abs here, just this middle part, came from the Michael Keaton Flash action figure. I cut his whole torso apart and basically took off that one little piece. So it's kind of like a cover, but it's glued in there. So it's all together. The actual midsection itself is the midsection from the Solar Suit Rebirth Superman, the one that had the beard and the silver boots and emblem. I used that midsection in here because it was already black and there wouldn't be any paint rub, and even if there was paint rub, it wouldn't show because all the pieces underneath are black. That's part of the reason why I went with all the parts that I did, even though I painted the entire body of this figure except for his gauntlets and the cowl itself. I wanted it all to have the same overall finish on it. However, if there is paint rub, like I mentioned, all the places where it would happen underneath are also black plastic, so you won't even notice it. So it's pretty nice. Anyways, that's kind of where we're at with the torso here. Up in the top here, I did cut a tiny little bit off of the top of the midsection just so it crunched a little bit more. There's not too much crunch here, but this suit didn't have too much crunch in that area so much, so it doesn't really matter to me. I'm not going to have him like kneeling down or like doing sit-ups, so that's fine. The other thing I did have to do is there's a peg that is on the inside of the chest part. That is what this pegs onto. So the peg, I actually cut a notch off of the top of it so that it goes up higher into the chest and makes the peg shorter overall. So this will go up higher into there and fit better. Otherwise it was down too far and there's a big gap right here. I didn't want that. So I did alter that peg and that's why it looks that way. These cape clips, I actually molded those, or sculpted rather, I guess you'd say, because I did it all by hand, out of epoxy clay. And as you can see, they do have the little notches in the front of them like they're supposed to. They actually have the little notches poked into the front, and they do have little circles on the top. And those are glued on there over where the cape is affixed, and that is also just glued on. So it's just glued at that two little points right there so that it has the full mobility that his cape had in the movie, basically. This cape I made myself, same as I make all my Batman capes, essentially. I always use the Batman Begins cape pattern because that's my favorite Batman cape. I think it's a great size and a great pattern. So this cape is huge. It is not wired. I did not want it to be wired. I just wanted it to be able to like drape and look nice. You could make a wired one if you wanted. I just didn't want to. So that's how it looks there with the cape. And there's his torso. So that's all the parts I had there. Next, we'll look at the arms. So these arms basically almost entirely come from also Rebirth Solar Suit Superman. And then I sprayed them also with an additional black coating. And we'll get to that paint at the end of this. The hands, as I mentioned earlier, are interchangeable with the other two that are below. I don't know where these all came from. Some of them may have come from the Omega Batman figure, but all four of them are the same size as each other. They all scale well. They all have the same finish, and they all switch out with the peg that goes on the Rebirth Superman arm. So that's pretty awesome. I'll put one of these down. So the gauntlets here, these are the gauntlets from the Future State Dark Detective Batman. I heated up and boiled the figure basically in super hot water, not actually boiling, but just under that point. And I was able to slide those gauntlets pretty much right off of there. They're not glued on very tight. Once you do that, you can actually see the shape of the arms underneath. They kind of are small and peg-like in order to fit the large gauntlet on top. I'll throw a photo up here. And essentially what I had to do is make the Rebirth Superman have that same shape arms underneath there, because again, I guess I could have just used the arms from the Detective Batman, but then there could be paint rub right in here, and I didn't want that because he's originally like white and gray right there. So any paint rub would be incredibly visible. All these are black pieces. So I carved this down with an X-Acto blade underneath on the forearm, and then was able to slide this onto there Again, I just heated this up with the boiling water and then slid it onto the arm, which was not boiled, that was cool at the time, so it retained its shape. And then it's not even glued, it just holds its shape. And the only other alteration I did was I trimmed the fins down to look more like the Batman Begins fin shape. And that is his arms. The discs are just the discs from the Dark Knight figure. They are the only black ones I had on me at the time that were able to fit in there. I know they've got the texture on them. Again, same as the chest has a texture on it. With the cape on, you can barely see it, and it's not a problem for me. I don't care. So here are the legs. Let's take a look at those. It's basically his entire lower body, I guess I should say. So the diaper, I guess you'd call it, his waist, that comes from, again, the Solar Suit Rebirth Superman. I removed the belt he had. You can kind of see where it was there. It's mostly covered up by the paint and then the shadow of this. It doesn't really bother me. The belt, I did not glue it, just because it's nice to be able to move it around a little bit sometimes or adjust it occasionally. It just sits right on there on the track. I did remove the tabs that were on the inside of this Dark Knight belt, which is where this comes from. It comes again from a Dark Knight figure, so the belt is accurate. There were tabs. I cut them all off, so it's just belt shaped now, as you can see. And as I just said, that just slides right on there, just seats right in there kind of evenly all the way around. And there's that. The legs, the thighs here, these come from, again, that Keaton figure that I took the abs from. He didn't need them anymore, so I took those because, again, they are all black and they were the right proportion. They weren't too big, and they had the lines on them that were sort of like the Begins suit already, same as his abs, because so much of that suit seemed like they just kind of redesigned the Batman Begins suit a little bit and added a couple of Keaton elements to it. I think they were trying to save money. I don't know. I hate the Keaton 2023 suit. That's another story for another day. You've probably heard it already. Anyways, just popped the pins out right here after attaching them in there, and popped in the knee and the lower leg from the Dark Knight figure. So again, the boots and the knee are accurate to what he had in Begins. The knees were probably a little bit different in Begins just because these are the Dark Knight knees, but either way, the boots are exactly the same. He had the same boots in all three movies. They were just a slightly different color in the second and third one. So that's why these are all sprayed black to match the first movie and match the rest of the suit. But otherwise, everything pinned together just fine. The only modification I had to make was right here. I had to trim a tiny little bit along this surface off of the thigh so that it fit into the knee and the pegs would line up. Otherwise, it was pretty much a one-to-one fit and it worked just fine. All right, well, there you have it. He is all assembled now. And for the time being, I actually chose to leave these arm discs out of him because it gives him a bit better of a range of motion as far as his arms are concerned. And I may actually just leave him that way because I think it still looks fine, and being all black, you don't even notice that they're gone. And like I said, better range of motion is better. Better is better. Yep. I did put both fists in there so you can see him with those. Kind of see him with the light. I had the light kind of shining down just because I think it gives him the best lighting and shadows to make this figure look as good as it can. And there you have it. Again, the cape is not wired, it is just fabric, and it can be posed. You can have it all around. You can do whatever you want with it. Yeah, it is a pretty big cape, and it does drape very well. So well, in fact, that I knew having him on the shelf with my other Dark Knight figures would kind of make the other Dark Knight Christian Bale Batman look pretty lame with that plastic cape he came with. That thing was an atrocious piece of garbage. Let me see if I have one lying around here. It looks like I don't, probably because I threw it in the garbage, I imagine. It was just terrible. So I had to upgrade my Dark Knight figure and give him one of the nice capes as well. So now he also gets the giant cape treatment. It's the exact same cape, and all I did was remove the other one. There's two tabs right up in there, and it's covered up now by this cloth cape. Basically, I just peeled down these two little tiny tabs right here, which are where his cape would affix in the movie, and I put the cape down in there, Gorilla Glued it in, put these over it, Gorilla Glued them over it. Now it's attached in there where it should be, and now he has a proper cape as well. As you can see, they are just about the same height. This guy looks a tad bit shorter, which I might be able to adjust with that peg in the chest. I might try to do that. However, I'm not really too concerned about it. It's fine. He also kind of hunched a little bit more with that neck and everything, so that's good. This guy stood up a little more straight. Whatever. It looks fine to me. And now on the shelf, I think they will look fine together, both with these capes and with everybody else. Here he is with the unmasked version that just recently came out. That guy's pretty cool. And you could interchange that head as well onto this guy, or the Nightmare head if you wanted to. Speaking of which, here he is with that Nightmare face. Looking all gross. Kind of crazy. One thing to note about the interchangeable heads is that the pegs are different sizes for each of them so that they would sit correctly on the neck. So the Nightmare head uses this gray peg right here, and the Dark Knight Batman head, which is the regular one that's on there all the time, uses this black peg right here. And as you can see, the black one is just a little bit bigger. So that's just all I had to say about that, I guess. It's pretty easy to pop them in and out of there. I don't have to use heat or anything, so switching the heads out is still fairly easy. Well, there you have it. That is how I put together this Batman Begins figure and how I upgraded the cape on this Dark Knight figure, and also made the accessories look a bit nicer. I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about that paint, so this guy's entire body, except for the gauntlets and the gloves and the cowl, are painted with a very specific paint. That is this right here, this Duplicolor vinyl and fabric specialty coating. This stuff is meant kind of for doing the inside of cars or even your seats or outdoor things, outdoor fabrics, stuff like that. So it's things that are kind of meant to be flexible, but also that this needs to adhere to very well. And I've never had a problem with this with action figures before. In fact, Toast has run into a problem quite recently where it leaked onto a part of the figure he didn't want it to, and he can't get it off. So as far as paint rub, you don't really have to worry. You don't have to seal this. I've never had a problem with it. For the cape clips, I just painted those after the fact with this stuff right here. This is Game Color by AV, and that's just the regular black. Well, that just about does it then. There's not really anything else to tell, and there's dogs outside that are going nuts, so I'm sorry if you can hear that. I can't really help it. They bark pretty much 24/7. We really love them around here. It's great. Anyway, these guys, I think they look pretty good now. They're going to look great on the shelf with all the rest of the Dark Knight characters, as well as maybe this guy right here. And otherwise, if you guys have any questions, just let me know in the comments. If you are wanting to make this figure yourself, again, it was pretty easy once it got started. It just requires having all the right parts pretty much. I'm sure you could do it using other pieces if you wanted. It would just require more painting, and that's up to you. So, you know, or you could just wait for the figure that I'm sure Todd will eventually release. He'll probably announce it right after I post this, I'm sure, because that would just be great, right? Oh well, I like how this one looks, even if there is that little bit of texture on there. Otherwise, I think I made a pretty fairly screen accurate Batman Begins figure to go along with the rest of my Dark Knight Trilogy figure set here. So that being said, I will wrap it up. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more figures. We've got more on the way. We definitely have more coming from the Superman family, a couple more coming from the Batman family, as well as that Dark Knights of Steel figure that we talked about. That is still on the list, and I think I finally found the fabric I want to use for it, so stay tuned on that. there should be an update on that one as soon as possible. I'm not going to make any promises. Well, until next time, I am Dan, and I hope you enjoyed this video today about this Batman Begins McFarlane figure, as well as this upgraded Dark Knight cape. Until next time, thanks for watching. This has been Void City Customs.